Well, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's conversation further in hopes that it becomes helpful for you in your life and your faith. My name is Jeremy, and I'm the content director here at North Point. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever it might be. I'm excited for this week because we're actually continuing a conversation we started a few weeks ago with my personal counselor, Rick Reynolds. And Rick, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but Rick has an incredible story. And while he is a personal counselor for people like me, he also does an incredible program called Affair Recovery for people who have struggled with infidelity in their marriage. And he's going to talk a little bit about that at the end of his podcast. But we had a great conversation on mental health because Rick has been sitting on the other side of people for decades now who have had all sorts of different issues that they're working through and wrestling with. And if you missed the first half of our conversation, go back 2 weeks in Overtime because it was incredible. It was so good to talk about anxiety and depression and all of these things in our mental framework. But today, for the second half of this conversation, what we talked about is how to deal with mental health issues when you are a parent. And he gave a lot of really helpful insights on what we can do today to lead our kids better, to love our kids better. And so I think you're going to find this conversation really helpful. So with that being said, we're going to jump right in. Here is part 2 of my discussion with Rick Reynolds.
I think one of the big aspects of mental health that people have a lot of questions, a lot of concerns about, and I've been on the other side of so many students over, 10 years, and just seeing, there's that statistic out there that says that, I think this is like almost a 10-year-old statistic, and it says that the anxiety level of a teenager today is the same as a psychiatric patient in the 50s, like the anxiety of a psychiatric patient. I know I'm kind of botching that quote, but it's worse than it's ever been for the next generation.
Absolutely.
And parents are struggling, have struggled. I've talked to parents. I've been on the other side of students and parents who have tried to figure out what to do with these issues. I have a couple of questions related to the parent side of things, but I'm just curious first, like, what would you say just about that, about next generation, kids, students, all that?
One of the things that at Affair Recovery that I try to help people with is developing a strong sense of legacy so that they know where they come from and who they are. Legacy is really, it sounds interesting, but maybe crazy, but that's a very important thing. I think what happens a lot of times is, especially again in this time of crazy social media stuff, it's like kids, instead of feeling really connected in their families even, they're just kind of living through their peers or other things through social media when the families in some ways maybe could do a much better job of bringing life. Donald Joy in his book, not Donald Joy, I said that wrong, Donald Miller. One of the things he points out is that he says, if you look at your life, this is just one aspect here, okay? I'll talk about a couple others, but if your family were a movie, if people were coming in and watching the movie of your family, would it be something that kept them totally enthralled, or would it be a yawner and people were just walking out? And most families, because they're not really giving or doing or growing or whatever, they don't have, they're not building things. Maybe we've forgotten how to do that. But so he even told the story, I thought it was really funny, about a family that he was, as Donald was talking to this man, he said, he was complaining about his daughter in the peer group and she wasn't doing well. She's running with the wrong kids. And he said, well, if your family were a movie, would it be something she'd really be interested in being a part of, or would she rather leave the theater? And he said, oh, she'd definitely want to leave the theater. And he said, well, maybe that's part of the problem. And so the guy, without even talking to his wife, which probably wasn't smart, comes home that night, and at supper, everybody's sitting around, and he tells them something like, well, I volunteered our family to raise $500,000 for an orphanage over in India. And there's just silence. His wife's shut up. The kids are upset. All the vacations have been canceled, but they did it. And it completely changed their family. because they eventually all bought into it, and they did some incredible things, and they traveled, and they built a life, and that changed their kids. So sometimes it's I'm not talking about vacations, but when there's meaning and purpose, when there's legacy, when those things are passed on, that's something that alone can help kids. Um, Connectedness with real people, um, healthy people. That's why I think youth groups oftentimes, I know you're seeing on the other side of that, you see things that are like, oh my gosh, they're so bad. But I can also tell you there are people that grow from that. I mean, I know that my youth group growing up was huge. At a Fair Recovery, we know that when people begin to have community that is about health and about life and about growing, I mean, we put them on forums. They're communicating every day. They're texting. They're doing all kinds of stuff. But this is about survival. And so what happens when the focus is about helping others along the way, when it's about um, processing emotions and just being vulnerable and honest about things with people that are healthy, then they get better. In our life, we will either search for people who are co-conspirators with us and who want to agree that we're victims and life is awful, and we'll either surround ourselves with co-conspirators to support our victimhood, or we'll support ourselves with healed individuals, healthy people who can help us find a way out of things. And I think we have to help our kids find really healthy people, other healthy kids. When they're in that sort of community, they naturally do better. I think that if somebody's really struggling with depression, get them help. Get them the right type of help. Find somebody who specializes in anxiety. I mean, I'm a big proponent. Not all mental therapists are created equal. Um, in the sense that some people have really worked at specializing and they've done their homework. They are really experts. Other people are generalists and they haven't. So find somebody who knows how to treat, you know, anxiety or depression. That's what they do. Uh, but don't think there's a stigma for seeing somebody. I mean, the bigger stigma is going to be just being a failure in life for the rest of your life. I mean, you don't have to be limited. I mean, I always believe that at a Fair Recovery, what we believe is you can take the pain of that betrayal, of infidelity, and it can serve as a catalyst. God can use that to, not transform you, to allow you to transcend, to become better, not worse. So, you just need times that we all need the crisis to get us to decide we need to change and do better. And hopefully COVID has presented opportunities that there'll be a bunch of people that go, yeah, I don't like this. And they make a conscious choice to change. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a German psychiatrist from World War II that was arrested and put in he was Jewish, in a death camp. And they killed all of his family members. They took away his manuscript, what he'd been writing for his life work. They took all of his property. They took everything. And Frankl said, the one thing they could not take from me is my attitude. They could not take my choice. And he says between every, tragedy and outcome, there's always choice. I get to choose how I'm going to respond. Nobody can take that from me. And teaching our kids how to see it as opportunity. That's, again, a different construct. You've probably heard the story of the kid that, he's so optimistic his parents gave him a big old pile of horse manure for his birthday. And the kid got so excited, and he gets a shovel, and it's a big pile, and he's jumping in there, he's digging around, and they said, his dad's going, what are you doing? And he said, man, with this much manure, I'm sure there's a pony in here somewhere. I mean, it all depends on how you look at it. And I hope people see that maybe there's a pony in here.
Yeah. To a lot of parents who are seeing signs in their kids, their son, their daughter, whatever it might be, and I think I want to come back to some of the things you just said a second ago. I think are really, really good. What are the signs that you would say are, because you mentioned getting, seeing a specialist, seeing a counselor, those kind of things. What are the signs that parents would see in their son or daughters that would indicate they should take that step? Because I think a lot of parents just don't know. They don't know, is this normal? Is this not normal? Are they just going through a phase, or is this something that's serious and we should get professional help? What are those signs?
Well, with depression, we talk about Siegel caps. Anytime there's sleep disturbance, they seem really lethargic, a loss of energy. They seem to be beating themselves up. There's lots of feelings of guilt. They don't have interest in doing anything anymore, so they just want to isolate in their room. They seem to have trouble concentrating and completing anything. They have appetite disturbance. They just seem to be moving slowly all the time. That's all the signs of depression. And that's chemical. That is not psychological. Um, the Oh, by the way, diet is another huge piece here. You don't want inflammation in the brain. I'm going to venture, but no sugar. Cut sugar out. I mean, believe it or not, that is a great mental health thing to do, is not have sugar. Um, with anxiety, I think well, that can also look like depression, but it's almost like they can't go to school. They're scared to death. They're living in fear. You have trouble motivating them. And a lot of times when I see people with the anxiety, unless it's like a phobia like flying, it'll be things like they just can't hardly motivate themselves because they're just so anxious about going to school. They'll be anxious about a certain thing. And so what we tend to do is say, well, just do it and you'll get over it. But that's not necessarily the case. So, but when they can work with somebody, it's not long till they can get through that. Or panic attacks. If they're having panic attacks, take that seriously. And get them help, because they don't have to live with panic attacks. If they have really negative kind of body dysmorphia, how they see themselves, certainly find somebody who can help them change that construct so they see themselves beautiful as they are, not as they ought to be. One of the problems with social media is it just has so um, set up this image with this whole picture thing everybody does on Instagram and whatever, that it just makes girls in particular, I think, feel amazingly inadequate. And I've had parents asking me about their kids wanting to have plastic surgery when they're 13 years old, and that they're thinking if they do that, that'll help. I'm going, that's not the problem. The problem is they're not healthy mentally. They don't have a good sense of their self-concept is jacked, and they need help.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple things that parents can do to help their son or daughters in their mental health journey, pursue mental health. You talked about, creating family moments, creating just a family dynamic, a family construct where it's not just their friends and their phone. There's, family is a real part of their life. You talked about just instilling those kind of positive experiences over time as a family, like the games, going on walks, doing things like that. Seeking professional help when they see the signs, like you just mentioned. Is there anything else you would add to that list of what parents can do to partner with their kids, their students on this?
Yeah, I think that a parent being able to really tune into their child and start dealing with emotions and sit there and say, you look, maybe I'm wrong here, but you look like you're really troubled, or you look really sad, or you look really, seems like you're feeling really frustrated. Is that right? What's going on? Being able to just talk to them about feelings and emotions, believe it or not, is huge. Um, Asking them what they're interested in and helping them accomplish and achieve so that they're able to pursue what's important to them, and they feel like you're supporting them to do those things so that they can you believe they can do things. So often, it's, I think that we put expectations on kids of what we really want for them, for us to be okay, rather than really just taking delight in them so they can be okay, and helping them when they're really upset, standing up for them, um, helping them figure out how to calm down, and just talking them through things, maybe coaching. It gets harder as they get older. I think I learned as my kids got older, so much of it was more about coaching than it was always about parenting. It was hard to tell an older teen. I look back at things we did as parents, and I wish we had done them very differently. I had one kid that was, not all kids are the same, and we should have probably taken a different route educationally for her. There's other things that would have fit her better than what we kept trying to get her to do, because we were kind of thinking, we had this cookie cutter mentality that, well, if it worked with the other two kids, it should work with this kid. And I think that was a huge mistake. She needed us to see her and accept her, love her, and encourage her for how she was, not as we thought she ought to be. So just getting out of the box that I think we get caught in as we see kids, changing that, I think, is huge.
Yeah, I feel like I need to take a lot of notes for when we do become parents, because this is all really, really helpful. I know a lot of parents, I've talked to some parents who just feel like they are failures because their kids go through stuff. And they, as soon as their kids start to go through something with mental health, they go, man, I've failed as a parent. What would you say to parents who feel that way?
Get over it. It's not your fault. I mean, yeah, there may be things that, if you can see where you're not doing things well, change it. But they're not just a blank slate, whiteboard that you fill in. I know with our kids, we've had kids as they've gotten older who've struggled. Uh, I've got a daughter who has bipolar. She does great, but doesn't change the fact that, she's bipolar. I've got a daughter, believe it or not, who's in prison. She made some hard life choices, and that wasn't our fault. I mean, certainly she was old enough, she made her own choices. But um, when you go through those things, hopefully the community at church, that other people, they get it. They still respect you. I mean, I know some great parents who have had kids that have really done some really stupid things. So it's not about, and I've known some parents who I think suck, and their kids are wonderful. So I think we take way too much credit sometimes as parents, but I do think we ought to take it very seriously. And it's worth studying. There's one of my favorite books is a book called The Power of Showing Up by Dan Siegel. Strongly recommend that every parent read that book. Gottman also has a book on parenting. I can't remember the name of his book. Sorry about that, but it's Gottman's book on parenting. But The Power of Showing Up, one of the things it does, it talks about attachment style, and it allows you to see as a parent what your attachment style is. But more importantly, it helps you figure out, I think, how to connect well with your child. And if there's anything that we need to do well at, is loving them and connecting with them so that they can feel that connectedness, but they also, that's where that sense of worth, we communicate a sense of worth to them when we connect with them, and we attune to them, and we help them plan. Um, we teach them to dream. Parents do that. And so we need to learn the skills of how to do it. It's not just about structure, it's really about relationship. So often, I think, as parents, because we haven't really studied it, we haven't read about it, we haven't seen the recent research in the last 15 years, which is phenomenal, by the way, in brain development. Um, we just kind of think if you provide structure, everything works out. But if you're not providing connectedness, there's a part of them that it limits them. But when we can be there with them, enjoy, and the good news is you only have to get it right a third of the time for it to turn out well. You don't have to be perfect, but you do need to be there for them, and you need to show up.
Yeah, that's a great way to, I think, end the parenting questions, because that was super helpful. if there is a parent that is listening, watching, and when you said the signs, the warning signs, they go, okay, I think it's time to take that step and get some professional help. Where would you point them to? Do you have any specific places or resources or people you would point them to?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. This is a tough one. I don't know if y'all have a resource list. If so,
I mean, we do CRC as one of our big places, Center for Relational Care.
CRC is fine. Um, because I haven't been treating children recently, um, I'm not really well acquainted with the child therapy community right now. Um, and so many of the people that we deal with for recovery are national. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
certainly not aware. But I do know their CRC is good. I know there are some good people. I would do some research. Um, let me say this for the podcast. One way that I suggest people find, one way to find a good therapist is if they have a specialty. If they have a specialty such as EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, or ETT, emotional transformation therapy, or IFS, internal family systems, or if they're trained in something, find out if they've gone through at least 2 to 3 levels of training. I mean, preferably 3 levels of training, because if they've gone through 3 levels of training in any particular technique, there's somebody that's actually specializing in that, and they're going to be qualified. Somebody who's done trauma treatment, and they've gone through 1 level, no. I mean, they may be really good. I'm not saying they couldn't be, but it's going to be far more dicey. You don't know yet, but you know if they've really pursued it, that they've honed their skills specifically to be able to treat certain things. So find people who have really find out about their training. I think that's a great way to ferret out who's going to be good and who isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Any last minute thoughts as we talk about mental health, as we talk about recovery, healing, just getting to better places in life?
Maybe I'm old, but there's the part of me that's, getting close to 70, sits there and looks at all of this and goes, holy smoke, we're in a really amazing time. That could be amazingly good, amazingly bad. I mean, this will be the time, I think, where some people will really grow and some people will really regress. I'm hoping that the church as a whole finds a way to use, kind of what we're taught and uses community, whether it's virtual or in person, who begin to find meaning and purpose and a way to give life to a world that's really hurting, because there's going to be more opportunities now than ever, I think, coming up. And I think just equipping, deciding that how I can plug in and do things and give and minister. I think all of those things will be important. So hopefully people watching this will understand it's about really living for something bigger than you. I mean, I know my relationship with God has done that for me all my life. And when I think you live for something that you can be passionate about, hopefully your faith, um, like I always think, bringing heaven down to earth. I really think so much of what we are to be is salt and light. When we understand that purpose and that meaning, and we think about other people, we give to other people, ultimately the people that will be blessed the most are us, probably. But I hope we'll bring life, and we see that. And again, that's one of those principles that brings mental health. And I hope that as you go through this, that people will find resources to grow and to give and to heal.
Yeah, that's really good. Where can people find more about you, more about what you do, more about what your organization does?
Thank you. AffairRecovery.com. if you're dealing with infidelity, I can tell you, we have so many free resources. And so you don't have to spend a dime. One of the things that's really good at affairrecovery.com is our First Steps Boot Camp. Tens of thousands of people have taken that. And it just gives you a way as a couple or even as an individual to maybe stabilize kind of where you're at. And it normalizes and you go, oh, this is what we need to do. Instead of just kind of, I use the analogy, I went cliff diving once in the middle of the night because we thought it would be more fun to do it at night than in the daytime, which is stupid. But when you're 13 or 14, you're not thinking, right? And but nobody ever told me anything about swimming underwater in the dark. And after I jumped off the cliff, I couldn't find the surface. And after about 30 seconds, man, I was panicked. And thankfully, somebody that was still up on top of the cliff turned the light on. And but I've always thought that and that swimming underwater in the dark is what it's like for couples, especially dealing with infidelity, because you don't know if you're going forward, if you're going backward, if you're going up toward the air, if you're going down toward, because you feel like you're drowning, you're dying. And what the First Step Boot Camp does is it just gives some direction and it normalizes. You go, oh, okay, we're normal, we're not dying, it's a light. And we want to provide a light so people can find the surface and begin to breathe again. And community so others can love on you and help you heal. So just use the free resources if you don't take one of the courses. There'll be plenty of things, videos. In fact, we have a YouTube video channel that has hundreds of videos on it if you just want information. It's the Fair Recovery YouTube channel. Go there. That's where a lot of people spend time. But get help. Don't just sit there and struggle in the dark. Right before this call, I was talking to a couple. They're 2 years out, and they've been struggling for 2 years. And they finally called saying, "We need help." And I told them, I said, "Man, I sure wish that we had been able to talk 2 years ago, because I don't think you would be stuck right now." And they said, after the call, they said, "Man, I sure wish we had done this 2 years ago, because we didn't have to be here." And I said, "Yeah, but you know what? You're doing something now and you're going to get out of it. And so do something to get out of it."
Right on. Well, Rick, thank you so much for spending time, being on the podcast and talking through some of this stuff. I know it's helpful for me to hear. It's helpful for so many other people. And once again, just thank you personally, just for all you've done. It's been incredible. So we really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Tell Ashley I said hi, okay?
Will do.
And thanks for letting me be on the podcast.